Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I'm Rick McCullough. I'm the president of Florida State University. I welcome you all. I'm pleased for you to join the inaugural Florida Caregiving Summit. Thank you all so much for being here, because I know talking about this issue is very important to many Florida families. I want to begin by thanking AARP Florida and FSU's Claude Pepper Center for leading this important conversation, and for the ongoing work to support older adults, caregivers, and their families. We couldn't organize something like this without the support of AARP. I don't know if all these folks are here, but I'd like to recognize distinguished leaders that would be joining us here today. Secretary Michelle Branham from the Florida Department of Elder Affairs. Is she here? And former Florida Senate President Kathleen Passidomo. I think a few people are running late, so they may not be quite here yet. And Representative Anna Escumani. So appreciate you all for your leadership in being here today. So one of the things you may not know about me and my wife Jay is that Jay's mom, who lives in Brookline, Massachusetts, so essentially Boston, is 104 years old. And she has 24-hour, she has a 24-hour caregiver that takes care of her. Her name's Krista, and Krista is basically a part of the family. She lives with her 24/7. And we have a lot of interactions with her. Jay's mom would not be alive without Krista. And the difference between a good caregiver and a bad caregiver is really evident. Every time Krista leaves and goes on vacation, Jay's mom it really goes downhill very fast. And so the importance of someone who, really, Krista does it, really out of love. She does it because she's dedicated to Jay's mom, and it's meaningful to her. The pride that she takes in the job is unbelievable, and it shows the power of caregivers. And, the folks that do this, it's a large number of people. As healthcare gets better and better and better, the other thing that happens is people like me get older and older and older, and hopefully I'll stay healthy for a very long time. But at some point, we get to an age where we have to depend on those caregivers to take care of us. And 2.7 million Floridians have to care for their loved ones every day. It's a big number. And the variation, I know you know this, but the variation in what caregiving looks like is completely, it's broad, really broad. We're in a situation that her mom can afford a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week caregiver. Not everybody obviously can afford that, and it is very expensive. I can tell you it is very expensive. And I don't think if Jay's mom, if she knew how much money that she is spending on this, I think she would be very, very unhappy about the situation. But it keeps her alive, and she's still with us, and it really makes a huge difference. So the things that are going on here at this summit are very, very important. The policies, the organization, the policymakers, you are the ones that are helping families to get these resources so they can get the care for their loved ones. And I know this afternoon you'll hear from advocates and researchers and leaders who are exploring this challenge at every angle. I know, again, I am keenly aware, as I'm the one that pays the bills, of the financial impact on these caregivers, and it's a really hard problem. It's a really, really hard problem. My own parents who have passed, went through a similar situation where we had to figure out, where they can go, and they could basically ended up my father was in a home for a long time, probably 10 years, and he needed that help. And my mother, who died of cancer, only needed it for like a year, and so she needed a different kind of caregiving situation. And in both cases, the challenge of trying to figure out where to put them and how to afford it and what's going to be right, and you don't want them to be in an abusive situation, and you want them to be cared for at the right level, but at the same time, you don't want to spend your entire life savings to take care of this. So it is a big, big challenge, and the policy frameworks that all of you are working on here are really, really important. I want to thank Dawn Carr for her leadership, and the Pepper Center for helping to bring together this great lineup of voices. Dawn has just been wonderful to work with in every way, and a great leader at the university. And I can see she does so many things at the university to help us out. So thank you for your leadership. I hear all the time that you're doing this, and you're doing that, and you're doing this, and you're doing that, and I'm like, okay, I'm so happy that she hasn't quit doing things yet. But that's the reason we're an efficient university at Florida State University, because when I came there, it's very common for people to have at least 2 or 3 jobs and get paid for one. And so when they had the Doge stuff in the state, we came out looking pretty good because we're very efficient. So anyway, thank you for that. We have a number of deans here from Florida State University. If you could please stand so I can recognize you. So we have Dean. We have Dean Fiorito and Dean Chapin and Dean Kasmer. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for your leadership. The Claude Pepper Institute on Aging and Public Policy, it cuts across a lot of colleges, including social sciences, Dean Chapin's college, social sciences and public policy, social work, medicine, nursing, education, health and human sciences, communication, information sciences, entrepreneurship. All of those folks are all involved, and because it's something that we are particularly good at Florida State University. So thank you all for being a part of this effort. This is a very strange microphone that I don't understand exactly how it works. I don't know if it's a directional or whatever, but I feel like I sound strange. But anyway, thank you for being here. Thanks to AARP. Could the people from AARP please stand up to be recognized if there is anybody from AARP? Okay, the one person. Thank you. Florida State University stands with you and with this important work. And I resisted joining AARP for a very, very long time, and because I felt like that meant something. But I'm a proud member now of AARP. And I urge you to join. Good discounts. And a powerful lobby, one of the most powerful lobbies in the world. So on behalf of our organization to yours, thank you very much for being here.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. McCullough. We're really lucky to have him get us started today on a very important conversation. There's lots of great discussions that we'll have today. I understand you've found the bar, and so feel free, if you happen to be wandering upstairs for more snacks in between things, we'll talk a little more about that, but feel free to go on the other side. We have lots of wonderful people from around the area who are providing resources about caregiving, and we'd love for you to come and learn more about what we have going on. But let me just get started on just a couple of framings so we can talk about why we're here a little bit. So first, this is just to give you kind of a lay of the land. There's a whole lot of us who are providing care to loved ones across the United States. These are big sacrifices that people are making. It's very challenging work. I don't know that people are ever prepared when they become caregivers until they're faced right in the face with all of these very challenging moments where they have not only the physical demands of care, but many of the financial demands, and we'll be talking about that today as well. And it's only going to be more important as we look ahead. So in terms of Florida, we have a significant size of our older population, but we also have a large number of older adults who are going to be here looking ahead. The number of adults who are over 65 is growing, but across all age groups, we can expect over the next several decades a large number of people to have needs to be able to live in their home. Just in terms of Florida alone, we have 143,000 by 2030, in the next 5 years, more than what we have now in terms of their needs, and 73,000 more are likely to need very significant caregiving work. And on top of all of this, we don't have a lot of professional caregivers available to do this. So right now, the estimated number of caregivers that we need, given the composition of the population in Florida, is that we need an additional over 500,000 more professional care workers to support the older adults living here than what we currently have. And if we don't work towards some of these important goals, family caregivers are facing even more significant challenges. So that's why we're here. So I'll give you a little bit of a lay of the land. Today we're gonna have 3 panels. We won't have breaks between. So we're just going to go through them one by one. We're really excited to have wonderful people. We'll introduce them to you who are here to talk about these subjects. And feel free to wander upstairs in between if you need a break or bathroom break. But we're excited for you to be here. So as we move forward, we're going to go ahead and kick off the first panel, which will be on the financial impact of caregiving. So I'll ask the panelists to come up and we'll watch a short clip.
I did take a big pay cut. I'm not at, a job that I loved, actually. I'm not there anymore. Sacrificing, a different lifestyle, basically.
We had to let go of our business. We owned a business for 35 years. When he got sick, we had to let that go.
Taking a pay cut, I had to retire. When I retired, my plan was go on a dream vacation, just enjoying life. Now I have to take on this role, caring for my mom.
My mom lives on a fixed income, so I do have to provide whatever she needs, whether it's over-the-counter medications, whether it's taking her to her doctor's appointments, whatever the case may be.
I quit my job early because, as my brother, he told me at the very end, I cannot do it anymore because he was so ill. He couldn't, so I took on that role. And financially, it was a burden, but I thank God for my support of my husband. He was always there.
It's not easy at all, especially when you don't have the support. Sometimes you can't even work. You have to just stay home and care for that person because now you lose that income. We don't have the fundings, or caregivers not even getting paid to take care of their parents. So how do you survive?
All right. So for this panel, we have 3 wonderful speakers who are going to be talking about the financial aspects of caregiving. I'm going to go ahead and give a little brief overview for each of them. To start off, Monique, may I start with you? All right. So Monique is an SHRM Membership Initiatives Director and co-host of SHRM's Honest HR podcast. As a strategic change agent with about 20 years of experience, of broad-based experience in senior leadership in all aspects of HR in the public and private sectors, Monique has been credited with implementing strategies that have decreased employer turnover, increased employee engagement and satisfaction, and improved organizational culture. Monique is also a master examiner and mentor with the Sterling Council Board of Examiners and has a passion for service and assisting others in their purpose, potential, and professional development through meaningful connections. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Miles Taylor is the Claude and Mildred Pepper Professor in Sociology and Director of the Pepper Institute on Aging and Public Policy at Florida State. She's also a dear friend and a colleague.
We know each other.
We work closely together. And she's here from Florida, originally, born and raised, and has lots of personal experience with family caregiving in the state of Florida. Her research has focused on demographics of aging populations, how early life factors shape aging processes, the dynamics of health and functioning changes in later life, and how statuses and relationships, including caregiving, influence well-being. She works to do really important work that brings together research, education, and community engagement. And our last speaker here is Robert Beck. Robert is a senior partner and strategic advisor for Pinpoint Results. However, Robert is also known in the halls of the Florida Capitol for his deep experience with state appropriations processes, public policy development, and has worked for over 2 decades serving in senior budget and policy roles in the Florida Senate, the governor's office, and various state agencies, including the Department of Elder Affairs. During his career, he has guided Medicaid policy reforms and the transition to managed care and overseen development of the governor's budget care and worked towards various recommendations. And over the past 18 years in particular, he served as an advocate and professional lobbyist here in Florida. So he focuses on programs and organizations that serve vulnerable populations. And as a special connection to our Florida State University Pepper franchise, as we often talk about it, he also worked on the Florida Pepper Commission on Aging in 1991, which is really exciting. So thank you all for being here. I have a few questions. What I thought we could do is I could just offer a couple of quick questions. Of course, feel free to add additional comments. But we're here to talk about the financial impact of caregiving. And a lot of people don't really know that this is a key issue. So I'm glad all of you here to talk about it. Miles, maybe we could start with you. Could you talk a little bit about for people who have never provided caregiving, they often don't think about what it entails to support a loved one. Could you walk us through all of the different ways that caregivers are impacted financially?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Great. So as Dawn mentioned, I come at this as kind of a numbers person. Some of my research deals with caregivers and caregiving and just kind of the demographics of aging. I also spent about 10 years as what we call a club sandwich caregiver. I was caring for small children and also for my grandmother at the same time for about 5 to 10 years, off and on. And then I was also an employee at Florida State. So I definitely want to say that the videos that we saw resonated with me. So Dawn told us that about 1 in 4 Americans are caregivers, and also about half of those are employed, right? So that's a huge proportion. That's a huge number of people in the United States. And then again, of course, a huge number in Florida, if we think about that. Caregivers also provide an estimated $600 billion of long-term care in the United States every year. So when we think about what kind of support that's providing, it's just such a tremendous scale. So when we think about that and put those into perspective, I think that one of the things that Dawn was saying was that we often think about like the out-of-pocket costs that come with being a caregiver, with caring for a loved one, with helping to pay for medical care, helping to get them to doctor's appointments. But there are other out-of-pocket costs that we don't think about. Things like If you have someone living or staying in your home, you have to make home modifications. There's really nothing to cover those expenses. And also having respite care, like I can't care every day, or I can't care certain times of the day. So you have to pay for that care out of pocket, and those can really add up as expenses. I think that also what we heard really highlights the kind of the bigger costs that are associated with being a family caregiver, and those are these opportunity or indirect costs, right? So many of us are taking time off of work that's often not paid. It could be sick leave days, it could be FMLA, but we're often having to take time off that we're not getting paid ourselves. Then on top of that, and we heard this from folks too, people are having to quit work, they're having to retire early, and those impact their own kind of wealth accrual and their own financial stability as they age. In addition, there's possibility that even if you continue to be able to work, you might have to forego opportunities like that promotion, or you might have to change jobs and kind of take a lower paying job, or even move to caregive for someone. And so all of those kind of accrue over time. So we know that the costs are really, some of them are hidden, but they're quite substantial, especially for people as they themselves age and think about their own security and their care needs as they get older.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Monica, you've spent your career identifying important ways to support workers and help people develop into strong leaders and in a variety of businesses. You've consistently advocated for workers to ensure they are maintaining a healthy, balanced life so they can be successful at work. How does caregiving come into play when you think about future human resources that we need in the labor force?
Oh gosh. So if you think about just what Miles shared in terms of like those direct and indirect costs, right? So you think about taking time off from work. So I come from the standpoint of the human perspective, right? So advocating for not only employees, but employers as well. So at SHRM, that's what we believe, where we can create better workplaces ultimately for a better world. And advocating for both not only just employee and employers, but if you think about the cost of productivity, when someone has to take off of work, the cost of taking that time off, right? So that's lost time, or even having to maybe not make that career decision as it relates to, do I go for this promotion, recognizing that the demands of the promotion may also compete with the demands of caring, not only just for maybe an elderly parent, but younger children or even adults, right? So you think about, you may have a loved one that a catastrophic event happens and now you're their caregiver kind of in their mid-year life, right? So maybe 30 to 40 years. And so what we believe is that working with employers to advocate on policies and resources and benefits that support employees, that's one less thing that they have to worry about when they come to work, and being able to provide those resources to them. From a human resources perspective, if you think about some of the data that was just shown earlier, or even as we're having this discussion around the need for caregivers in the state of Florida alone. And so if you think about the talent pool for that, so we're aging as a population in the state of Florida. Our birth rate is going down in the state of Florida as well. So where are we going to get the talent to be able to make our organizations or our businesses continue to operate? So there's this kind of, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place where we have to have a holistic approach.
Absolutely. Those are really great points. I want to bring it to kind of a policy level, taking from these two first points. So Robert, the policies that support caregivers play an important role in the financial impacts of caregiving on the caregivers themselves. Can you talk a bit about effective policies that have worked to help reduce the financial consequences?
Sure, absolutely, Dawn. So that's a good question, and I think it's really relevant today for people who are in that sandwich generation, taking care of a parent or a grandparent. You know, so several states out there offer various types of tax credit programs, tax incentive programs that help reduce the costs of caregiving. Some of them are reimbursement type credits, grant programs. Georgia has a tax credit that covers out-of-pocket expenses. Missouri, Nebraska, New Jersey, North Dakota, Oklahoma. All of those states are a little different than Florida, though. They all have a state income tax to which those tax credits are applied. Florida doesn't have a state income tax. So a tax credit program really wouldn't make sense in the state of Florida. But while we don't have a tax credit program, we have another program that we have found is extremely, extremely effective, and it's been around since 1978, and it's called the Home Care for the Elderly program. The Home Care for the Elderly program, basically, you literally have to meet a nursing home level of care to be eligible for the program. And you have to have a qualified caregiver who can be a family member, or it can be your neighbor if they're qualified to provide your care or to help you with caregiving at home. The program provides a monthly stipend of $160 a month. It used to be, it was like $98 or $99 a month when I worked at Elder Affairs, which has been decades ago. So it's increased a whopping $60 a month, but you would be amazed at how caregivers, what a difference that makes. So it's about $1,920 annually, but there's also another component to the program called the special subsidy component. So if you are caring for an elderly grandparent or a spouse, and you need a ramp, a wheelchair ramp built, you need grab bars put in the home, you need help just purchasing incontinence supplies, you can get a special subsidy which will cover the cost of that ramp and the construction. It's a remarkable program. There's about $22 million in that program today, and we help about 6,500 seniors a year. You know, the program has a high attrition rate. I think the average age is 85 or 86. But it is one of the longest standing, most successful elder care programs that's administered through the Department of Elder Affairs, and the local area agencies on aging actually oversee the delivery and the eligibility and the enrollment into that program. So fantastic program that actually talks a little bit about what Miles talked about caregiver needs, just ramps and grab bars. That's expensive. So.
Absolutely. Well, these are obviously really important things. We have limited resources. And as we look ahead, we know it's going to become even more significant. Miles, as a sociologist and a demographer who studies aging, when we think about these future projections, how do you think caregiving will play a role in shaping our country's economic capacity?
Sure. So when I love a good demographic projection. Dawn knows this as well as anybody. I love the charts that she was showing. So when we think about caregiving projections, we think about the demand side, but also the supply side. And there are actually multiple demographic trends that are happening right now on kind of both those sides of the coin that are really important, that we really need to be paying attention to. On the demand side, we not only have a growing population of older adults, but we have a very quickly and very rapidly growing number of kind of what we think of as the oldest old traditionally. So those 85 plus, those folks are going to, I want to say, double in the US between now and 2040, right? So that's huge. We also have cohorts of younger older adults who are more disabled than the cohorts before them, right? So those folks that are very old are more prevalent, and then you've got kind of sicker people that are aging into later life. Plus, we do know that the current latest estimate, I think, on the lifetime risk for having dementia is now at 40%, which means each of us has a 40% chance of experiencing that. So if you think about you, your loved ones, you know, chances are this is going to be a part of all of our lives as we age. And also, we know that this is very expensive and very burdensome care. The dementia and Alzheimer's are biggies when it comes to caregiving. On the supply side, we also know that there are some demographic trends happening. Monique noted that we not only have an aging population, we also have the number of children that are going down, right? So families are getting a little smaller. They're also getting more geographically dispersed, which means that the number of older adults who are going to be living to these ages who don't have kind of multiple children kind of to be around to maybe support them, those percentages are going up. The last thing that's happening is that we know that the percentage of divorce and never marrying, right, is also going up. So again, fewer available caregivers to support the greater need, right? And the last thing I wanted to mention is kind of something Dawn touched on, is that the paid workforce that's projected that we're going to need moving forward is currently, like, we're really not ramping that up quickly enough in the economic space. And so it will mean a greater kind of burden that's going to be placed on families. And as Dawn mentioned, or maybe Monique mentioned, sometimes this is something that happens out of the blue that no one's really prepared for. So,
Thank you, and thanks for kind of going in that direction. Monique, I think it would be helpful for us to sort of think about, as we prepare for this, the future workforce. So thinking about the future workforce here in Florida in particular, how do you think we can best position ourselves to ensure we're prepared for what's coming and the growing needs of older adults?
Yeah.
We have?
So there's a couple of strategies, just from an employer standpoint, that a lot of employers can adopt or organizations can adopt to be able to cater to or accommodate this population of caregivers, right? Thinking of all three. If we think about it, we have 6 generations in the workplace right now. I'm a mother of a 21-year-old and a 16-year-old, right? So we have individuals that are traditionalists, so that's our oldest population in the workplace, to our youngest population at the age of 14, they can start working. So you have 6 generations in the workplace, and what organizations really can do in terms of really preparing for the future is, one, creating that culture of openness and empathy. A lot of caregivers in the workplace don't want to disclose that they're caregivers for fear of just being overlooked for opportunities or the stigma that comes around being a caregiver. Sometimes caregivers are a little more apt to say they're a caregiver if they're caring for an elderly parent, but an elderly parent, but if you think about younger children or even adult individuals that need caregiving needs, they're not really willing to step forward. So creating a culture of openness, one, training people managers or training team members just in general around being empathetic towards individuals that are caregivers. It looks very different, right? So the traditional look of someone that is a caregiver now, kind of going back to how diverse it is. So being able to train employees and the workforce in general. But what's more important is being able to provide resources and benefits and educating employees about the resources and the benefits that are available to employees that that are a caregiver or may need those resources to them. So that way, if someone is worrying about the financial impact, learning about legislation that is in place or benefits that are in place that they can take advantage of. So those are just a few strategies that we can do to just kind of prepare for it, but recognize that it's coming. And honestly, we're here. We're in it right now, right? For me, I attributed a lot of being able to work for my employer. I cared for my bonus mom at the time, and so being able to have an employer that provided a flexible schedule for me, to where if she needed to go to a doctor's appointment, I can take her to the doctor's appointment. If she needed someone to be there in the home with her, I can work from home. So really allowing some flexibility and not thinking of what the traditional workplace looks like.
Those are really great comments and ideas to help prepare us to move forward. Robert, where do you think we're missing the boat with the current policy infrastructure for caregivers? What do we need to be paying attention to? Where do we need to be most thoughtful in terms of policy priorities as we look ahead?
Goodness. Well, I think what I would say first and foremost, I think Florida is leaps and bounds ahead of other states across the country. Our legislature, our governor, our state agencies, prior governors, current governor, have really, really worked hard to make Florida a leader from a long-term care perspective. We led the country in establishing Medicaid managed long-term care, which everyone had grave concerns about when it was brought forward back in 2013 by Governor Bush. And You know, what that program has done is we have completely rebalanced the long-term care system. We have more people being served in the community today than we do being served in nursing homes. It used to be just the opposite back in 2013. And, you know, we can serve people in the community, in the deep end side of the community for $25,000, $30,000 a year versus $111,000 to $150,000 a year for a Medicaid nursing home bed in a semi-private room. You know, even with these successes, you know, Florida still spends over $4 billion on institutional care, care in a nursing home. And thank goodness we do, because the people who are in nursing homes need quality of care. The workers need to be paid well who are taking care of them. And this legislature's made huge investments in that recently, more investments to ensure that the most vulnerable folks are taken care of. In terms, Dawn, in terms of what we should be doing more of to prepare for the future needs, that one's one of the easiest ones for me, and that's really to focus on what works and do more of it, period. You know, we talked a little bit about home care for the elderly, super successful program that survived through decades and decades and supported by Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. And given the size of Florida's senior population, if caregivers do stop providing care, this budget is not big enough to support what that nursing home bill will be. That's as frankly as I can state it. We need to continue to increase programs like home care for the elderly. And I'd really be remiss. There's a dear friend of mine in the audience, Matt Hudson, former representative in the back, and the chair of House Health Care Appropriations. When I started working with Matt 15 years ago, the Community Care for the Elderly program was about $42 million a year. That program is well over $100 million a year today, and that's largely due to his leadership and his speaker's leadership, and the Senate, of course, to increase these programs and help serve more people at home. And Community Care for the Elderly provides that whole array of care, in-home support, Meals on Wheels, respite care, home modifications. You know, the best thing that we could do today is to focus on what works and recognize we can spend a whole lot less money helping an older person, because the overwhelming majority of older people will not need nursing home care. They'll die at home. They'll receive care at home like we all want to do. And if we focus on those programs that make economic sense but are also what people want and what caregivers want, we got to be about supporting caregivers and investing in those types of programs. So.
Thank you so much for bringing attention to those important issues. In addition to the wonderful people in this room, we also have lots of people watching from a distance, a lot of caregivers. We have partners who've been involved, and I'll tell you a little more about the video that you saw was from partners with Share the Care, who were so generous as to allow us to get some of their stories that you'll hear today. And those caregivers that are watching you and talking, watching you all speak about this issue right now, I'm wondering if, and this is for any of the three of you, if you might have some thoughts about advice that we might provide to caregivers who are going through these difficult times and facing these issues. What are ways that they might be able to kind of move forward in all these challenging positions, and what might be useful advice, especially those that are often working caregivers or ones that are struggling to try to make sure they can keep their loved ones at home as long as possible?
Well, I'll go first. I will say speak up. More, you know, oftentimes we don't want to share what we're going through. We don't want to share like the challenges that we experience. And so without knowing what resources you need, or without knowing what support you need, you have to say something. You have to let us know. And you'll be surprised how many other people are going through similar situations that are fearful to say anything. I will say, being an HR leader, that was one of the things I had to recognize, because I felt like as a VP of people and culture at an organization, I felt I needed to have this cape on and everything was going well. But one of the things I was able to do with connecting with many of my employees is being able to share with them, how I could relate to caring for smaller children, caring for an elderly parent, and so speak up, say something, because it is through your voice that you get the resources and the support that's needed.
I was just going to say to caregivers, the legislature funds the elder helpline, the statewide elder helpline, through the Department of Elder Affairs and the area agencies on aging. It's a statewide information and referral resource. There's big waiting lists out there. However, area agencies are really adept at connecting caregivers and seniors to resources that do exist in the community. And there is trained people that are there to help. So call that number, and based on your community, if you live in rural Florida, that's a challenge because of the limited workforce and resources. But in the more metropolitan areas, there are resources available to help caregivers.
I think even though these are the folks on the ground, I think I would say to caregivers, first and foremost, you are not alone, right? And you've heard from multiple people in this room who are here to talk about caregiving, but who have also experienced it themselves, right? And I think what Monique was saying about, you would be shocked at how many people don't want to talk about it but share these experiences. So I'm glad, advice would be, even within your employment situation, to speak up. I think one thing I would also say is we often don't think about the fact that caregivers need to make sure that their cups are full. And so they often will put off their own health, their own well-being. So as hard as it is, and I know how hard it is, to take a moment or find ways to replenish oneself, whatever that means, to make sure that you're caring for yourself so that you can care for others, to just try to find ways to fit that in as well.
Those are great comments, and I have just one more question for you all, and then the question that I have for you last is about the people who aren't yet caregivers. So one of the challenges that we often have, we're not great at thinking about our future selves, maybe 5 years, but we have a really hard time envisioning a future in which we ourselves need care, for one thing. But also sometimes it's hard for us to envision our own loved ones getting to a place where they face many of these challenges, and we're really knocked off center when we're faced with that. So in thinking about the preparation for the future, what is it that people who haven't yet experienced caregiving might be thinking about so that when these things occur, they can be prepared?
I can probably go first maybe with that. I would say for me, the foremost thing, and remember too that, I was trained as a gerontologist, and also my caregiver was like already 90 years old when I took my first real grown-up job. So, the writing was on the wall for me, but I think it's very crucial to start having conversations within families and within loved ones. We don't ever want to talk about like end of life issues, or what would happen if, or what would happen if I got sick, who would make these decisions. Those are very hard conversations to have. And I would say that trying to normalize those conversations about like our preferences and kind of what we expect, or if we do have plans, what our plans are. I think that would help. And then for me, one thing that I feel like it's important for me to do is to educate young people, right? So I have a lot of students in the college classroom, and I try to make sure that I educate them on the realities of what the expectations will be, because they don't think about, they're young people, they don't think about having to care for someone as they age. So just trying to prepare our youth, and then maybe just normalizing conversations, and to keep the caregiving, love and care, to keep those conversations going.
Yeah. Yeah, I would honestly echo everything that Miles said in terms of having the conversation. But I don't think you could ever fully prepare, right? We're all here today and we can walk out and something can happen to ourselves or our loved ones that will change the trajectory of our life, right? And that may require us to be a caregiver or be the receiver of care. And so I think having those conversations, those are always hard because no one wants to think about it. But the reality of it is that it's possible that it can happen. Yeah.
One, very good words. I don't have much more to add other than that if you are over the age of 20 and under the age of 50, look into long-term care insurance. Yeah. It's still available. I have a policy, and it provides in-home care for, my policy's like 48 months, $11,000 a month. I bought it decades and decades ago, and to try to prepare. And I think that given the labor shortfalls and the workforce things that you've seen up here and just the general strains on the budget, we all need to prepare.
Those are great words of advice. And the average person, adult in the United States, can expect to spend about 5 years of their life providing care, which is a significant chunk of their life, and much more than I think people envision. Providing care for older adults and family members. And we know lots of people, including some in this room, who have gone way beyond that 5-year mark. And preparing for that is often a great challenge. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here today and sharing your words of wisdom and giving us great insights for how to think about the financial challenges of caregiving. Thank you. Thank you. So as we transition to our next panel, I'm going to go ahead and ask for the next short video. And I just want to tell you how grateful we are for our Share the Care partners for letting us have an opportunity to share their stories today.
It's not easy. It's not easy at all, especially when you don't have the support.
I'm glad I have what I have now, which is Share the Care. You get resources there that really helped me and my mom so much in terms of mental health. We have webinars. We have all those things that really help the caregiver.
If the doctor's office would have given me resources, I would have called things like daycare. Once the patient gets worse, someone to come to the home to help me, to give me a break, to help with daily activities. That's a huge one because it takes a toll on the caregiver, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
So what that means is that family caregivers have to take up the slack and provide care for older adults living in Florida. So we're much more challenged in that regard.
Share the Care helped me quite a bit with my pursuing this journey as well, by offering supply counseling and some hours so I can have relaxation time. Thank God for my support of my husband. He was always there to help me through the trials that I'm going through, that journey. He helped share that journey with me. So I have to be grateful for that, as well as the support from the other agencies.
We have to be thinking about our own and our family members' plans. What are we going to do when this happens? It's not if, it's when.
All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We're going to move into the next panel, and it's going to cover policy in caregiving. And I would be remiss if I didn't say we're missing one of our panelists right now, so hopefully nothing's come up, but we've checked on her, but we're going to be fluid up here and make some long-winded answers. Hope you guys love it. That's what we do best. That's right. We're going to buy some time, guys. And I just, again, want to remind everybody, we've got about 200 people watching online right now. So thank you for being in the room and thank you for being out there online. It's important conversations that we're having today. So let me introduce this panel. I want to welcome Secretary Michelle Branham. So she leads the Florida Department of Elder Affairs. Yep. She has over 2 decades of experience in public policy and health advocacy, including 9 years as the Vice President of Public Policy for the Alzheimer's Association. She's been a driving force behind Florida's efforts to support seniors and caregivers. We're honored to have you with us today. And next up, we have Representative Dr. Anna Escamani from Orlando, and she is a lifelong advocate for Florida families. With a PhD in public administration and nonprofit executive, she champions policies that support caregivers, like expanding healthcare access, improving public education, and securing permanent tax relief on essential items like children's diapers and adult incontinence products. And yes, we've got our full trifecta now. Just in time.
Coming in hot.
Right, that's right.
The perfect entrance.
That's right.
God. Hello.
And our third panelist who is here is former Senate President, current Senator Kathleen Pasadomo, who is a dedicated public servant and former president of the Florida Senate. Throughout her career, she's been a champion for Florida seniors, leading efforts to expand access to health care and strengthen the caregiving workforce. Her landmark Live Healthy initiative is transforming how the state of Florida supports aging populations and those who care for them. We're honored to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And Senator, I made this announcement before you got here, but there's about 200 people watching online. So just wanted to make sure you didn't know it was just the people in the room here. So I'm going to start off with kind of a popcorn question for you guys, and would love to hear from each one of you in no particular order. What kind of personal experience may you have with caregiving, and what drives you to be a champion of this issue?
I'll kick us off, and I just want to say it's always an honor to be in the company of all of my colleagues, especially some really incredible women up on this panel. And our Senate President has done amazing work on this issue and so many others. And of course, our Secretary, we first met in the Alzheimer's space. And so it's been really a treat to work alongside a lot of folks in this room and folks on this panel. And so for me, the personal experience really started when I was a kid. In fact, my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer when I was about 9 years old. And so I became her caregiver at a very young age. And of course, as you can imagine, for a 9-year-old, it was very difficult. And her cancer diagnosis was like so many ups and downs. And so there were some good days and some really hard days, having to manage her medication, having to hold her hair when she was throwing up, and really just also kind of seeing this, your loved one get sicker and sicker. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2004 when I was just 13 years old. And so not only the caregiving experience, but the experience of that loss, right? After years of caregiving, it's a very mixed emotion, I think, for anyone who's been there. You can probably relate of the deep pain and sorrow of losing a loved one, but also like that weight, you know, because it's so hard to take care of someone and be their caregiver for so long. You don't know what to do with yourself to some degree. And you know, for me, it was throwing myself back into school and trying to stay distracted through work, which is a numbing mechanism that I have not stopped because all I do is work. But for me, we didn't know where to go for those types of support. We weren't, you know, we're an immigrant family, so we didn't really know what respite was. We didn't have the acknowledgement of applying for social services as a recourse. And so one reason why I'm so passionate about this issue was that growing up and experiencing it as a young girl, and then also becoming elected and realizing, oh, there actually is a system of support out there if families know that it exists. And so that's kind of my passion for it, and I'm just so grateful for all the professionals in the room because it really is such an incredible safety net, and we don't talk about caregivers enough. So thank you to AARP for uplifting this conversation.
Thank you so much. Listening to you, gosh, my heart goes out to any young person that has to manage that kind of caregiving. What profoundly changed me and why I joined the Alzheimer's Association, I was there for a decade, was my mother was taking care of my grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. And when you watch a loved one who's so vibrant and beautiful and sassy and a little fiery Italian woman lose herself, and watch my mother watch her lose herself, it's what made me join the Alzheimer's Association. And I think beyond seeing my mom love and care and the kind of pain and suffering that she had to lose her loved one twice, not just to the disease once mentally, but then again physically, is so hard. It's propelled me and called me to be with the Alzheimer's Association, and then to watch amazing couples and daughters and mothers and fathers and spouses go to our capital and then go to DC and talk about their story and their pain, knowing that the person there is living with Alzheimer's and their loved one is caring for them, or they might have just lost somebody with Alzheimer's. That profoundly changed me, to kind of watch that courage. They weren't advocating for themselves. They were already in a deadly disease that was going to take their loved ones. They were advocating for us and the next generation of people, and that turned me into somebody else completely. I was so humbled and so driven for a cause, so I can't begin to appreciate you all thinking about caregiving. It's one of the most important, amazing things that we do. It's also one of the most burdensome things that we do. I always say that if you're caregiving, you're in a position of power and strength over someone that has no power and strength. It's a humbling and painful experience, and something like Alzheimer's, where it's a long experience. I've learned to make sure that we're taking care of the caregiver while we're taking care of the person they're caring for, because I've watched so many caregivers burn out. So my advocacy is unlimited. My energy is boundless for people living with chronic conditions and their caregivers, and to be there right in the middle of it with families is where I think where we do our very best work. We have the Florida Alzheimer's Center of Excellence that journeys with caregivers all over the state of Florida, from the beginning of the diagnosis all the way through the disease, and every twist and turn that that disease takes, and that lifeline that we are able to provide. I know I've lived into God's calling, and I've come full circle by offering that kind of help at the Department of Elder Affairs. So it's a legacy I'm just really proud to leave behind. But I'm thankful to every caregiver, thankful to AARP for this opportunity to have this kind of conversation. I think it's so important and so necessary.
Okay, I guess I'm next. I had a little bit of a different experience with caregiving. So my parents were, which as you all probably experienced, caregive themselves. My mother passed away at 94, 95, I can't remember, in 2020. And she and my dad were taking care of each other. He was 98 at the time. And you know, you start noticing how they start slipping. And, you know, I was here in the legislature, and I would go home every weekend, and I would spend, you know, Saturday or Sunday all day with them, and then the other day with my husband and my dog. And I used to cook dinner because my mother would say, oh, well, I cooked every night, and there's nothing in the refrigerator. And they didn't. And so she passed away in 2020, and then there was my dad. And so you know, one person can't do it when you're here. So we hired a woman who actually she was my cleaning lady, but she was the most wonderful, terrific person that we actually had her go to school to get, you know, some of the skills for unskilled nursing, you know, and she took care of my dad for 4 years, and you know, when my mother passed, they've been married 75 years. Everybody said your dad's not going to last very long, and it's true. You know, they don't last very long because their life companion had passed. But Andrea, who I call her my black sister, which is kind of cool, you know, it's really, yeah, you know, it's family, it's Irish and Italian and who knows what. But she took care of my dad for 4 years. And she took care of all of his needs, his medications, take him to the doctor. But the most important thing she did was talk to him and spend time with him. And she, you know, he was a doctor, and she's called him Doc, and, you know, they had an amazing relationship. That, to me, it was priceless. And, you know, I could come up here in Tallahassee and do what I do, or did, or will be done soon, because of the caregiver who became a part of my family. And that to me was, and by the way, I meant to say I wanted to thank Zane and the AARP, because everything that I have done with regard to vulnerable adults since 2010 is because of her, and prodding and pushing and cajoling and sharing. And so you guys are doing an amazing work, and I just want to thank you. And that's probably my end, but I just wanted to say, and I really appreciate everything you all are doing, and everybody online, et cetera. So that's my 2 cents about my experience.
Oh, no, thank you. Wow, like all three of your stories very different. I'm sure everybody in the room can identify with a piece of that, most likely, or anybody out in the virtual world. So I'm going to kind of get into some of the questions. And so, Secretary Branham, I'm going to start with you, put you in the hot seat. Not really hot, but the cool seat. That's right. We know Florida has made significant investments in aging services. What is your long-term vision for caregiving in Florida, especially as Florida's population continues to age?
Oh, thank you for the question. Listen, Florida needs to be at the tip of the spear. We have 6.7 million seniors. We have about 18 states worth of seniors combined. And if you're a senior, you're going to be a caregiver at some point. I talked to lots of families about that, about how we plan, how the Department of Elder Affairs always says we want to live well and age well, but what does aging well look like? And that's a little bit of planning. So how do we wrap around support services and care, not just for the people that are living with chronic conditions, but their caregivers, so we're set up for success. So I mentioned the Florida Alzheimer's Center of Excellence. Hopefully my legacy, if I ride off into the sunset, that part of my legacy will be that we serve families, because we have second highest prevalence for Alzheimer's in the country. We have almost 600,000 people here living with Alzheimer's disease, and about 1.2 million people providing unpaid care. That's just for Alzheimer's, because it's one of the most long caregiving experiences. I can't even imagine if you were to quantify how many caregivers in general in the state of Florida. So I think for us, it's important about wrapping around services, not just around a senior in need, but their caregivers as well. And we've done a really good job of investing our time and our future in that capacity.
Absolutely, and I think that, just a quick plug, we've got some new numbers for the state of Florida, and we're over 4 million, estimated over 4 million unpaid family caregivers in the state of Florida, and that's an estimate.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely
I'm sure it's a
resonates.
conservative estimate.
Yeah. So Representative Dr. Escamani, I'm going to head to you next. You've worked across the aisle on several initiatives. What have you learned about building bipartisan support for caregiving-related legislation and legislation in general?
Yeah, another really good question, and so important for all of us as advocates. You know, the beautiful thing about this topic in particular is that it's very nonpartisan. At the end of the day, when you are a caregiver or when you are supporting a caregiver, I'm hopeful no one cares about the party affiliation, right? That when someone needs help, it does not matter who they voted for. And so really, I think to embrace that type of attitude in approaching this issue, and to really look at it holistically, and to understand that if we all have the capacity to love and care for someone, then we deserve policy that reflects the values that we are exercising to take care of those people in our lives. And so part of it is building those friendships. I had an early friendship with Representative Scott Plakin before I was elected, and most folks in Orlando who know him are surprised by that. I remember we actually did a TV interview together over Christmas, and it was all about bipartisanship, and it kind of surprised some people. But for those who don't know, Representative Scott Plakin continues to be a major advocate for Alzheimer's awareness and resources and prevention. He lost his wife to Alzheimer's, and he actually over time remarried, and now his Representative Rachel Plakin is a state rep as well. So that relationship for me carried on to work with her on these issues as well. And so it just speaks to the importance of withholding any of that partisanship on this topic. I mean, obviously, we're going to have our battles on the House floor, like cats and dogs, or the Senate floor, respectively. But at the end of the day, you need to lead with respect. And so it's okay to disagree on subjects, but I always do my best to separate the policy from the person and debate the policy and so look at that person as another human to say, we disagreed on that, but can we agree on this? And I think it's really important as advocates to really lead with wonder, to suspend judgment, don't make assumptions about a lawmaker on a specific topic, and ask open-ended questions and learn more. But what I find so beautiful about this issue in particular is that it truly has no partisan bounds. And honestly, the biggest debates have to do with regulations, scope of practice, and funding. And so those are some of the actual debates that we have. And huge kudos to AARP, because your work in uplifting these issues, but also looking at it from multiple lenses is very important, because it's not just about the caregiver, it's also about what's the economics around that caregiver? You know, how is a family navigating the other costs around them? Cost of food, cost of electricity, cost of the healthcare coverage. And so for me too, it's about drawing those connections. So it's not just specifically about policy that directly impacts caregivers, but how about the ecosystem the caregiver is trying to live in? And I think there's a lot of need around housing affordability, along more funding for our respite centers like Share the Care, how to make sure those resources are available to everyone. And again, those debates have to do with funding, not with partisanship. So you will still have debates, but fortunately they're going to be on a different type of landscape.
And I would just add to that too, our legislature has been so incredibly supportive. So whatever side of the aisle you're on, every year we get more money for community care for the elderly, home care for the elderly, Alzheimer's disease initiative, all the things that wrap services around families and keep them in the best possible situation for caregiving and support.
Yeah. And I'll add real quick too, like one of the bills that we worked on across the aisle about 2-3 years ago was our tax break on diapers. And I want to give a shout out to the Claude Pepper Law School for elder needs, elder affairs, because they were really instrumental in getting this bill passed, showing up to Tallahassee. And the reason, part of the intersection with this issue was it was not just children's diapers, also adult incontinence products. And so we were able to hear directly from people with disabilities, people who are caregivers, of why the cost of taxing these items was a burden for them. And though it took us time, because the policy did have a fiscal on it, meaning that it cost the state money, we generated at the time $100 million from taxing diapers. And so eliminating that line item, if you will, from the state budget was a conversation to have. We ultimately got it done across the aisle, working with my Ways and Means chair on the House side, and of course the Finance and Tax Committee on the Senate, and Governor DeSantis signed it into law on the tax package. So it just comes to show that you can't get things done in this environment, but you definitely have to be a team player.
Yeah, great points. All right, Senator Pasadomo, I'm coming to you. Your Live Healthy initiative has been described as one of the most ambitious healthcare reforms in Florida history. What inspired the effort, and how does it address the needs of caregivers?
Well, you know, I mentioned my dad. He was a physician, and he retired, finally in his 70s, and then he moved to Florida, and he volunteered as a retired physician at the Senior Friendship Center in Naples. And then he was an ophthalmologist, so he also created an eye clinic through the Lions Club, all volunteers. And, you know, the conversations that we had were about healthcare as I was growing up. It was always about, healthcare, because that was what his background was. And he had brilliant ideas. Even when he passed away at 100, he was still giving me things he wanted me to pass. But, the discussion was always about access to healthcare. And it wasn't, and you start thinking about it, our state is growing exponentially, and Secretary mentioned it. There a lot of the people that are moving here. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, who's telling everybody to move here. But a lot of them are older, and a lot of them need health care, and they're not bringing their doctors with them. Right. They're not bringing their nurses with them, right. And they're not even bringing their family with them. So we have a lot of senior citizens who, when they move here, in there, and I know this is a long explanation, but it kind of shows you what you all have to deal with. You know, they move here when they, you know, they all retire at 65, 70, and they're hale and hearty, and they're on the golf course every day playing, you know, bridge, and all of a sudden they start getting older and older and older. And they develop dementia, and they develop illnesses, but they don't have support surrounding them. And so, you know, a lot of people were talking about what do we do? And the number one thing we needed to do was bring in health care personnel, from soup to nuts, from the lower level technicians to brain surgeons or whatever. And so that's what the genesis of the bill was. How do we provide quality access to health care for all of our residents? But when you think about it, the more and more of our residents that need health care are seniors. And, you know, we didn't specifically say, okay, we're going to do one part of the bill for caregivers, but it's all part of a larger discussion of the health and well-being of our citizens. And, you know, the bill was massive. It was a lot of work. You know, we had a lot of people working on it. Senator Burton was a trooper. Senator Harrell was a trooper. The House Speaker Renner, I got to give him credit for, you know, pushing that through the House. And, you know, a lot of it is funding. I get it. But the number one thing was just what are common sense things that we can do to attract healthcare personnel to our state, from loan forgiveness to how do we get people to go to work in the rural communities. And so, you know, it passed. I think we had one no vote, and it was only because the person didn't like me for whatever reason. I don't know why.
How could that be?
It was in the House. It wasn't the Senate. It was somebody in the House. You know, I don't know, but you know, it again. We'll see how it works. One of the things that I'm really proud of as part of the Live Healthy initiative is the something that we don't talk about as much as the behavioral health teaching hospital concept, because we really have a problem in our state, and we did not have a system of managing our health care delivery. And so we set up that whole system with the teaching hospitals, and Tampa General opened the first one. And I look forward to seeing how Live Healthy develops over the years, because it should be a game changer. It doesn't specifically address caregivers, but of course, that's just part and parcel of it.
Yeah.
There's an absolute tie to that, and the accessibility of medical aid for caregivers is key to part of that caregiving journey. So thank you for that explanation. All right, Secretary. What are the most pressing challenges facing family caregivers in Florida today, and how is your department working to alleviate them?
I think first it's understanding that we have to talk to families in total and understand what, if you're a caregiver, that means you have a loved one with a chronic condition, something's happening, and that's going to affect everyone in the family. I think caregivers first, they're tired. Sometimes they can be isolated. They don't take care of themselves. They're not getting enough sleep. All the things that you typically would think of for caregivers. And for all of you out there, you know this. You know the sleepless nights. You know the anxiety. You know the feeling of being so overwhelmed, you don't even know what number to call, much less pick up the phone and figure it out. So I think part of it is understanding where the caregivers are at. And making sure that we're reaching them with resources and a lifeline. Our dementia director is right above us, and she has put together an outstanding team of care navigators that know exactly where to meet you with your need. And it's going to be a custom need for everybody. It depends on where the caregiving experience is and where you're at with that, and whether you're ready to receive help, you know, and I think those things are incredibly important. So support services, a lifeline, sometimes it's just like you said, talking, just having conversations is really important. Awareness that the resources are out there. Shockingly to all of you, the government doesn't do a great job of telling you where your resources are. So just getting better about that. And then I think working really hand in hand with legislators to let them know what the issues are. I used to, when I started, explain a caregiving experience, explain the disease. There isn't one legislator that needs that explanation anymore. Is that a good or a bad thing? but it does tell us where our needs are, and I think that's ultimately important. So beyond the funding, it's also setting up families for success. So that's what the Department of Elder Affairs is committed to, is making sure families are set up for success with respite services, education, support, all the things that we can do to keep a caregiver healthy and well.
Go for it.
Just one point I want to add to the Secretary's excellent comments is that sometimes we also center the conversation on being a caregiver to elders, and I do want to acknowledge too that we also have a disability community that needs caregiving, and we have so many families that are still on the wait list for APD services. So I do want to acknowledge too that like the legislature has been working toward eliminating this wait list for a few years now, because the reality is that we see more and more cases of a child who becomes an adult with really serious chronic and acute types of challenges, where that caregiver, as they become older, it's much harder for them to take care of that now, adult with disabilities, and nobody wants to turn to assistant institutional facilities unless they absolutely have to, right? So that at-home care is so important, and a lot of those families have struggled just because of delays and not being fully eligible. For example, when you're applying for APD for autism, there's a severity you have to reach, and it's frustrating for families because if you have a child with autism, your feeling is that they have autism, I need this support right now, but the way the state measures it is on a scale, and so they might say, yes, they have autism, but not to the degree where you need support. And for a family, that's not the best answer, right? And so we're kind of grappling with those questions of how do we make sure every family has that type of support system on that spectrum. So some other big concepts that we really still need to address, and I think a lot of families who move from other states, they also think that their Medicaid coverage is the same everywhere, and that's also not the case. So they might come from a state where it's maybe just there's more services or more staffing, and they come to Florida and they realize that it doesn't carry the same. So I think also trying to ensure these families have full support is very important.
Well, I think you made a perfect segue to the next question I was going to ask of you. So here's the utopia that you get to be handed.
Oh my God. Too much power.
Right? If you could design a comprehensive caregiver support system in Florida, what would the core pillars look like?
So, okay, I actually have notes for this question, because when I wrote this question, I was like, oh, this is a heavy one. And I'm really curious what my peers think too, because we all have different levels of experience. And as the Secretary mentioned, bureaucracy is always a challenge to move and to change. And so thinking about if we were starting from scratch, we already talked about this a little bit, but I think it's the income security for caregivers. We don't compensate this care, and we know it's an essential challenge that families have as they pull away from work to be a caregiver. And so I would want to see income security for caregivers. They're saving the state money, so we should really compensate them for that. Simple access to resources, as the Secretary mentioned, and also like a continuation of human interaction in a digitized environment. We're shifting everything to computers. We know that's just not accessible for every person, and especially for caregivers are overwhelmed. These forms are long and complicated. Obviously, I want to simplify them, but I think to maintain the human aspect of it, to have a care guide, walk you through that process.
I just wanted to say they're up there. So there's your care navigators right up there. That will
I waved
a dream
at her.
come true,
Yeah.
right?
I waved at her.
That's part of our wish list come true, right?
Yeah. Well, and the continuation of that, right, and expansion of it. So yeah, Florida's already doing that, which is great, and to not, give in to automation, if you will. And then guaranteeing respite and caregiver training and support. And so I mentioned organizations like Share the Care. You'll be hearing from them at the next panel. But giving a break to caregivers, I think, is an important piece of this conversation. And of course, as we talked about, home and community-based services. And the last point that our Senate President already addressed, actually, is that workforce pipeline, because that is a big challenge for us. And so I think some of it we're already doing really well. And so I think the areas that we're struggling with is going to be just the caregiver compensation alongside eliminating these types of wait lists that families are navigating, able to access care.
Yeah, great. So, Senator, I'm coming down to you because this is another kind of segue question. You've had a great view of how things can get done in a bipartisan manner. I know one of the things that we've worked with you so often on are bills that are bipartisan supported. And so where do you see opportunities for some cross-party collaboration specifically on caregiving policy points?
I'd like to address that by addressing the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, and that is our vulnerable adult and our elder financial abuse. That it is a huge challenge, and we, everyone in this room and probably, everybody that is watching are dedicated, caring individuals, but there are a lot of people out there that are not. And elder financial abuse has been coined the crime of the 21st century. And our biggest challenge as we move forward is how are we going to protect our older population from financial abuse? And unfortunately, much of it are caregivers. And I'm not, some of these are some of the guardians. And Zane and I worked on some major legislation back even when I was in the House with Senator Dieter, and then when I was first in the Senate. So what we have to start looking at is to make sure that we protect our vulnerable adults. And it gets back to when you think about that, all these people that are moving here, that they're hale and hearty and they're in their 60s and 70s, their families are all up north.
Yeah.
And they're here by themselves.
Yeah.
And I first the vulnerable adult bill that we passed in the legislature in 2000, and I think it was in 12 or 13, was like groundbreaking. Nobody had ever done it before. It was you kind of brought it to me, and this is how it started. I will never forget this as long as I live. I was reading the Naples Daily News, and there was a story about a couple on Marco Island. And they had moved down here and everything was fine, and their kids were up north, and they were befriended by their realtor. And she became part of the family. The kids are up north. Oh, mom and dad are fine. They got this friend. Little by little, the silverware's gone, the jewelry's gone, the credit cards are gone, to the point where this realtor and her husband moved in the house, locked the older couple in the back bedroom, and wouldn't let the family see them. And we couldn't do anything about it. So, we passed the bill. And that's just one little instance of problems that are arising that we have to work together to do. And it's not a question of money, it's a question of vigilance. Mm-hmm. You hear about it, incidents, at the bank where the teller is friends with the old lady for years, and all of a sudden she shows up with somebody and cashes a $5,000 check in cash, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we are passing legislation to rein in some of these bad actors. We've been doing it with guardians. But the reason I bring this up is that you all are in the trenches. You're in the front line. You're the ones who hear about it, see it, and talk to your colleagues. You have to tell us what the issues are, so that when we work on legislation, we get it right. Because we don't know. I mean, we're in an ivory tower in Tallahassee, but you guys are in the trenches, and that's what we need. I'll be gone after next November, but Anna, are you gonna be on, or you running for something?
I'm running for mayor of Orlando.
Oh, okay, you're gone too. Well, you're gonna have to get some new people sitting here. Well, you're gonna be around. Zane will be here, so we have to start looking at it. We passed some guardianship reform. There's more to do, and that's the see me side of the issue. And I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, because I want you all to know that it's not you I'm thinking of. It's the people out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Senate President has a really great point too about term limits. I think it's worth acknowledging, like all this incredible advocacy and talent that she has demonstrated. With term limits in mind, like that's why we're both transitioning. I've served my 8 years in Florida House, so even if I wasn't running for something, right, it's the end of the term. And so you are the constant voices, right? And as a Zane, because, a lot of us will transition, whether there's new leadership, whether another election. And so to maintain the advocacy on this issue is so important. And as Secretary mentioned, hopefully you don't have to really educate baseline, right, of the value and the importance of this topic. But the nuance of the policy solutions, you will have to. And so to also, continue to be that strong voice. If you don't know who your state representative or state senator is, please find out. I often, talk to constituents. They say, "Oh, I'm in District 10," and I'm like, "Oh, that's your congressional district. Who's your state representative?" Right? And so we don't often realize those levels of government exist in our backyards. So just emphasize that when you're talking to your peer groups too.
And I'll just take a personal point of privilege to say that, we're talking about state level action that is addressing caregiving. It's also a federal issue, and there's significant reforms at the federal level that are obtainable, that we have leadership here in Florida. So I'm putting a plug in. We actually had one of our members of Congress that was going to join us. Things changed in Washington. She was unable to join, so that makes sense. But like Congresswoman Kat Kammick is a champion of caregiving legislation at the federal level that would really reform, to Representative's point, of creating a payment plan for unpaid family caregivers through a tax credit. While nominal, it still can be life-changing for someone that is having out-of-pocket expenses for their caregiving. So I just want to make sure everybody remembers that this isn't just a state issue. This is also a federal, and something that with your members of Congress to continue to put a bug in their ear that there's, for the last 4 years now at the federal level, been 5 caregiving bills, 3 of which are sponsored by Florida members of Congress, that have not moved because of the gridlock. So keep that bug in the ears of your members of Congress as well. It's absolutely critical. So it's a two-way street here. So I'm going to bring this in for a landing and do another just general question, the same question of all of you, and whoever wants to go first, feel free. I think it'd be great if y'all could share a moment from your career that made you proud about the impact of your work that you've had on caregivers and just Florida, because as you've all mentioned, this is kind of the tail end right now of the career that you're in this moment. And so if you would, please share. Sorry, I don't mean to put y'all on the spot.
I'll go first, whatever. Obviously, for me, it started with a recognition that, our older population were, we always take care of the kids. We should. Everybody talks about the kids. We should. But, even when I first was elected in 2010, I started talking about our older folks. And so the Live Healthy was the culmination of everything that I'm proud of for service in legislature, honor of a lifetime to work, and to work with the most dedicated staff in the entire country, I think, who spent hours and hours. It wasn't my accomplishment. It was the accomplishment of everybody I worked with. And all of the people in this room, and people like Zane, who all weighed in and all provided meaningful input to come up with a work product that we can say, oh, it's that good, we don't have to tweak it. So that's mine.
This is hard for me. That's a hard question because I've been in a contemplative, reflective mode, both action-oriented and also, all right, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? You think about your longevity and about having a year left and how much you want to accomplish and whether you're leaving the world in a better place than how you started. I'm most proud because I think I'm proud every day walking the halls and thinking about the tremendous responsibility that we bear, and that it's a calling and it's a privilege. And I'm honored when I hear from the field about people. We just met with the care navigators that I was just pointing to up there, and they were talking about these families, and these families were testifying about what a difference that it made to them to have somebody on the other end of that line just talking to them. One daughter just saying, I thought I was going to commit suicide. I didn't think I could handle taking care of my mom. It just got too stressful and too complicated, and I'm raising kids and I'm trying to have a job, and my mom is in such a state that I just can't handle it. Or to watch a spouse like that. And to be able to hear from those families and hear them say that you gave me some peace, some comfort, just another day to go on, doing what I had to do. that made me so incredibly proud. I cried all the way home. It was in Orlando listening to that and thought about what that kind of legacy is. So, it's a big responsibility. It's a collective burden that all of us have up here, but it's one that's the most important thing I've ever done in my career is to do that. So I'm proud every day, not of myself really, but of the team that inspires me to keep going, and to the team up there for doing what you're doing. I can't get over you all every day. Thank you.
It's such beautiful comments, and there obviously are some really great policy fights and wins to be proud of that are also intersectional, as I mentioned earlier. And so, I think the Senate President's champion legislation of Live Healthy Act is huge, and especially when it comes to addressing our provider pipeline challenges. I also remember working on legislation that came from the COVID-19 pandemic when it came to visitation. This was a huge issue for a lot of my constituents because they had loved ones that were living with Alzheimer's, that were in like an ALF, a nursing home environment, and they weren't able to visit them during COVID, and that was a huge issue of social isolation. And we started seeing more research about the impact of social isolation and longevity, and we were able to pass legislation to allow caregivers to still see their loved ones in these types of situations. And so, some of it's reactive, some of it's proactive. Just to add to the mix, I will say that our work with constituent services is something I'm really proud of. The job as a legislator is not just the policy work in the chamber, but it's what you do back home. And so we've helped, oh my gosh, like tons of people as it pertains to navigating some sort of bureaucratic issue and needing to go toe-to-toe with a private insurance company or sometimes with a state insurance company or company provider to make sure their benefits and their medications and their basics are being met. And we've had so many success stories of just being able to pick up the phone and call an agency to say, hey, this constituent is having a challenge, how can we help fix it? And so I take a lot of pride in being able to serve as that facilitator to help folks support themselves and their families in the caregiving environment. And when I think too about some of the different crises that we've had, not just COVID-19, but even just the hurricanes that Florida has, our legislative team, we jump into action during hurricanes where we actually will put out a call for anyone who needs help. We'll say, if you need help with debris pickup, we'll be there. And we recruit volunteers. We show with our rakes and our gloves and our trash bags. And almost every person who fills out that form is an elder who just doesn't have the capacity or the money to hire someone to clean up their yard and chop up their trees, or doesn't have the strength to do it. And the fact that we can be there for our elders, and while we're there, make sure they're connected to our different senior services, right? And so I think it's that on-the-ground effort that I'm really proud of, because sometimes the policy fights can take time, but we can deliver immediate relief on the ground if we put our resources and capacity together. So really proud to do that.
All right. Well, I want to thank all three of you for taking time out of your very busy lives. For those that don't know, we're actually in the throes of an interim committee week, and Florida government is always percolating. So these ladies took time in a very chaotic moment to join us. So thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom with not only the people in the room, but the people online. So thank you.
My biggest challenge is basically finding time for myself. Sometimes there are blocks of times where I can do what I want to do, but I really can never be spontaneous because someone always has to be there with her. I'm self-employed, I work from home. So I sleep over at my mom's house every night, and I'm there like 70-80% of the time at her home.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with no help. In addition to that, I also have back issues, so I try to take care of myself as much as I can, but I always put my family first, and I forget about myself. A typical day for me would be preparing breakfast, administering medications, clean, bed bath, change diapers, dressing, toiletries, help stand if I can, as my dad is ailing in health now and cannot stand even with my help. So I am looking for help as we speak.
It's a lot of involvement with her on a daily basis. There is no relaxing really until it's time to put her to bed.
The most challenging is just the everyday, I don't want to say it's annoying, but sometimes the repetitive things that you have to do, the caring for them, it's overwhelming, it's a lot. It's almost like taking care of a child, but it's an adult role.
A typical day will look like me pretty much doing everything for my mom because she's very dependent. She can't do things like brush her teeth on her own. She can't use the remote. She can't use the microwave. She have trouble walking. I have to, give her medications. I have to prepare all of her meals and pretty much everything that she needs on a daily basis. She gets up and she walks around a lot, so I miss out on a lot of sleep, just making sure that she's not up walking around in the house and doing something that could potentially harm her or harm me and others.
They're putting the care and needs of their family member above their own, so they don't have the recovery time to be able to just kind of feel okay. And they start to feel underwater and emotionally overwhelmed.
It's very hard to balance it. It's very chaotic, but I do the best I can every day, and I take it one day at a time.
We were joking before that we're batting cleanup. And so first in our lineup is Whitney Scott. And Whitney is a dedicated advocate and expert in memory care who serves at Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare Memory Disorder Clinic. Whitney brings a wealth of experience in supporting individuals living with dementia and their caregivers. She's deeply involved in her community and outreach, education, and an innovative supportive program like the Mindful Moments Group. It's a pleasure to welcome her to today's panel. Thank you. Next up at bat is Alex Jacobs from the Florida chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Alexis plays a vital role in advancing the association's missions across Central and North Florida, supporting caregivers, educating communities, and advocating for policies that improve the lives of those affected by Alzheimer's and other dementias. Her work helps connect families to critical resources from care navigation to community-based programs like the Brain Bus and the Walk to End Alzheimer's, and we're glad to have her with us today. And batting third is Marianne Philbin, who is the CEO of Share the Care. These are the videos that you saw of the folks that she works with, a leading nonprofit supporting family caregivers across Central Florida. She's a passionate advocate for caregiver support and aging with dignity, and we're thrilled to have her here to share her insights on Florida's caregiving landscape. And I'm thrilled to have her join us for this important conversation. All right, so I'm going to start off with asking my new friend Whitney. The holidays are approaching, and I feel like the holidays keep moving farther and farther back in my calendar. Now they're somewhere close to Labor Day. So holidays are a really stressful time for caregivers of all ages and sizes and all kinds of needs. Can you tell me more about how caregivers can navigate those kind of challenges and some strategies you would suggest?
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So to give a backstory, back in 2023, I received a phone call from a caregiver who signed her mother out of the memory care unit on Christmas Day. And she thought that it was going to be a nice occasion and that her mom and, family members would get to have her home, and it was not. And so okay, there we go. Okay, was it on? Back in 2023, after talking to a caregiver who shared her experience with the holidays and having her mom with dementia, I created something called dementia-friendly holidays for caregivers. And the holidays are already a stressful enough time for everyone. The hustle and bustle, last-minute Christmas shopping like me, so many different things come with the holidays. Add being a caregiver to that, that's 10 times more stressful. So I did create, and we do have some in our resource fair, but I created some information on different strategies that you can do. So the biggest thing that I encourage my caregivers is to, if you haven't already disclosed to your family members that your loved one has dementia, do so. Also, if you have to make adjustments to your holidays to make it easier, whether that's meaning downsizing your guest list or maybe not hosting the holiday dinner at all, but finding ways to make the holidays as manageable for you and your loved one. Something that's very important with this time of year is that the time is changing, and sundowning, if you're familiar with sundowning, can occur during the evening time. So something that I always tell my caregivers is that to plan your holiday dinner maybe earlier in the day to try to reduce any symptoms of sundowning. So I'm really very excited. This has been very popular in the office, and just talking to caregivers and giving them that space and strategies to make their holidays dementia friendly. Thank you.
So, Alexis, the Alzheimer's Association has a myriad of kind of outreach and other kinds of programs. I think folks in Tallahassee are used to the sight every year of the brain bus pulling up in front of the Capitol building. But could you describe some of the other kinds of supports and services that the Alzheimer's Association provides? And speaking as someone who's a fairly isolated caregiver, what kind of supports does the Alzheimer's Association provide that don't require me to leave my person and go out from my home?
Well, thank you so much for that question, and thanks to all of you for being here today. We have a ton of different resources is the short answer. But of course, to be more specific, I myself am out in the community about 50 to 70% of my time providing presentations, education, awareness, being present both at organizations, businesses, faith-based organizations, and generally meeting with people at community health events. There are my counterparts located throughout the state. I serve primarily the Panhandle and the greater Big Bend region, but there are, I want to say, 4 or 5 other community engagement managers throughout the state that do the exact same thing day in, day out. Of course, that's not to discount our brain bus staff. They are also traveling up and down the state of Florida, doing mobile outreach events and providing awareness materials both to the community and to individual caregivers as we schedule those out throughout the year. Online, we have a number of resources, whether those are going to be virtual support groups, education and training for both healthcare professionals. Healthcare systems has its entire own division that we can work with individual health systems to develop tools directly for them. Our Alzheimer's Navigator, Care Navigator, is an opportunity for caregivers to go online and develop a personalized kind of care template by entering in some of the topics that they're interested in. Of course, our 24/7 800 number is available throughout the country as well as Puerto Rico. We know in Florida we have a lot of snowbirds, we have a lot of transplants who might be concerned either about a loved one in another state or possibly even in Puerto Rico, especially as we are still in the throes of hurricane season. That becomes more and more important. And they can call 24/7 and receive direct conversation with a trained person on the other line who can provide them local resources for their for the patient, for their loved one. And really, if you want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me or take a look on our website. We do have enough that I'll cut it there, but if you're interested, almost certainly we have something available for you.
Thank you. So, Mary Ellen, I was struck by the videos of all the folks that you're working with. And so my question to you is, one of the themes that I saw through almost all the videos were workforce challenges. And so how can businesses, chambers of commerce, houses of worship, organizations like that support caregivers in the circles that they touch every day?
Yeah, the videos were of caregivers that were attending our annual caregiver forum, which we provide, not being annual, it's every year, for caregivers. And the students from Florida State came with their videographers and did little interviews with them, and it was very validating for them. I just wanted to give FSU credit for that. They worked with our caregivers very patiently. As far as what the loss of financial stability in families due to caregiving, it is almost universal. It doesn't really depend on the economic status of the family prior to caregiving. The challenges brought about by caregiving people make choices that they wouldn't otherwise make about their own careers, about businesses, as you saw in the videos. People no longer able to keep their businesses, having to sell their businesses, having to sell their homes because they cannot live independently in their homes. Taking advice from people that might not be the optimal people to take advice from. I think that as far as businesses and chambers of commerce and that type of thing, I think that people need to understand that access to care is vital for any community. And if a family does not have access to care, it doesn't matter where they live, they will not have a positive experience in that community. So to understand when someone walks into a restaurant and their person has some type of disability, and I want to emphasize the fact that there are multiple types of caregivers, and they're not all caring for someone with dementia. And I think we're talking about a bigger picture here in terms of caregiving. Dementia causes special problems and challenges, that's absolutely certain, but there are people in wheelchairs with mobility issues, people with brain injury and vascular issues that also have to go out in public and use the same facilities that we use, have access to being able to use a changing room at a clothing store, those type of things. That's what makes an experience, a community experience, a positive one. So I think it is about thinking it through. I think it's about thinking it through as a community. You can't do it just as one business. It has to be, all right, these are standards that we want to meet to be welcoming. There are communities in the state of Florida, including Orlando, which are aging and disability-friendly communities, and we should all probably check and see if your community is one of those, and if not, look at those standards that they have for those.
So I drove all the way up here from the north part of Pinellas County, and I took US 19 for most of my way up, and Pinellas County is the densest urban county in the state of Florida. Most of US 19 that I was driving would not. So Whitney, you're providing Alzheimer's and other dementia awareness and support and services. How does that look different in a rural region than a dense urban concentrated one?
It's very different because when you are, well, the Memory Disorder Clinic services all of the Big Bend, including our rural communities. And what makes it so different is when you have communities that are underserved, there's a lack of resources, and there's a lack of being able to provide those services to community members. So what makes us unique is that I very believe in meeting people where they are. So going to the community, going to the senior centers, going to the libraries, hosting workshops, caregiver education, dementia awareness. But it's very difficult when you're in areas that are underserved and there's a lack of resources, and, some cases being helpless because the problems are bigger than what you can offer. But at least for my team and I, our goal is to make sure that we can do our part to bring whatever resources we can to the community to make their journey as manageable as possible.
Thank you.
If I may,
Sure.
kind of piggyback on that a bit, I come most recently from the Office of Rural Health, and part of the reason I wanted to take this job is it combined kind of my passion for aging care issues with a passion for meeting people in those rural spaces. So I currently serve, as I mentioned, the Panhandle and the Greater Big Bend region. The majority of the space that I am working in on the day-to-day is going to be our more isolated rural areas. And absolutely, there's a real dearth of resources and access to not just healthcare, but food. Transportation is a really big one that our particularly rural elders face. Telemedicine, while a great opportunity for those critical access hospitals and rural EMS agencies to get specialty care to patients, doesn't always work for older adults, whether it's lack of access to broadband or tech literacy issues. There's a lot of intersectionality with the challenges that face rural spaces, and I do think that being there, meeting them where they're at, as Whitney was saying, is crucial. And I think also goes along with those age-friendly kind of philosophies. It looks very different doing age-friendly in rural as well. Because of the types of jobs that are available to caregivers. They're going to be a lot more physically labor-intensive typically. They're going to be jobs that don't let you take paid time off to go do caregiving work. So there are a lot of issues, but I think by meeting people where they're at and trying to address not just the overall structural issues of rural health access, but also kind of the cultural differences of what it means to talk about brain health or other caregiving concerns in rural spaces is going to be the way forward. Thank you.
Mary Ellen, one of the things that I picked up, I think, from the videos is the attention and the listening. And so I think it strikes me as your organization spends a lot of time listening to caregivers, and then after they listen to caregivers, trying to figure out how to change and adapt their services and the things that they offer for those needs. My joke is if you've talked to one caregiver, you've talked to one caregiver. And so talk to me about how your organization has sort of listened to caregivers over the years and tried to adapt your service delivery.
Thank you. Great question, query. I think the only way to really serve caregivers is to listen to them and to make changes based on their expressed needs and desires. Unfortunately, a lot of time, funding policies doesn't allow us to have that level of flexibility with the way that we change and adapt to caregiver needs. I did want to tell a little bit about the story of Share the Care. We were one of the original model programs funded under the ADI Respite Grant. 4 programs were funded in 1986. Share the Care, at that time we were not called Share the Care, we were something else. But we were chosen, and it was funded at a faith-based organization, and it was strictly volunteer respite for Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers. Since 1986, not only because of the expressed desire of caregivers, but because of the awareness that has happened at the policy level, at the larger community level, about the value of family caregivers, which has already been stated by the other 2 panels. How much would it cost for the world to do what caregivers are doing? It's infinite. I mean, you can't even think about that. There is not enough public funding to do this job. So does it pay for the government to support caregivers making an effort that they want to make anyway? It's their choice to care. and also that they're going to be caring for that person in the place that they want to be cared for. So those are the two most expressed desires, is that I want to do it, I want to do this for my family member, and I want to do this at home. So how do we adapt the choices that we make for people? I think that we were going to talk policy in a little bit, but I think when I say that sometimes policy is so rigid that it makes it almost impossible to make the changes that you're hoping to make, I would like to express the fact that caregiving is not an aging issue. It is a family issue. It affects people of all ages. Our program serves people that are caring for anyone that's disabled in need, that is being cared for at home, that's 18 years of age or older. That means that if the person that we're taking care of or helping the caregiver take care of is 20 years old, the caregiver is usually the parents who are in their 40s. It might be a dementia issue, it might not be a dementia issue, but it's a disability independence issue that still needs to be addressed. The problem with that is funding in the state of Florida and pretty much everywhere comes in silos that are designated to age groups or illnesses or particular types of diseases, and makes it impossible to move everybody through the system smoothly. So the policy issue in my mind is that what are we here to do? What are we here to talk about? First of all, if you all did not get this amazing report, it was available at the front desk, and this is the demographics of the state of Florida. This basically validates what I'm saying. The average caregiver, the demographic of a caregiver is a woman in her 50s. Okay, that's who's doing it. If you average it all out, that's who's doing it. How do we support these people? What would a woman in their 50s normally be doing? They'd be working a job, taking care of family, both young family and old family. So we need to reset how we fund these programs, be more accessible for people, and not make people get a diagnosis of this in order to get this. So the way that Share the Care has been lucky is that we have been funded. We were funded as a separate agency, and it did not go through the regular aging network. It was always specifically caregiver oriented. We did start out with the dementia funding, but in 2002, the Older Americans Act created the National Family Caregiver Support Program, which allowed us to open up our services to people not necessarily with dementia, but all people, with an emphasis on elders, either the patient or the caregiver being an elder. Allowed for a whole gamut of services, and it's not just daycare and respite, it's mental health counseling, it's care management, it's support groups on the earliest stages of caregiving, and then ongoing support like webinars and live access to other caregivers. Because the number one biggest complaint for caregivers, and I bet everybody at the table knows this complaint, is I feel so alone. I don't know anybody else that's going through what I'm going through. Set it up so a few people that are going through that meet each other. They are no longer alone. They are a community of caregivers. So long answer, I told you I'm bad that way,
So actually, let's keep it on the policy question. So Alexis, I'm going to ask you sort of, if you had the magic policy wand, talking to the caregivers that you interact with, what would you say to legislators or others about changes that would support caregivers?
Well, I do think access. I think access overall, like I mentioned, it's not just about access to healthcare, but, health literacy, tech literacy, access to healthy food. I live a little ways outside of Tallahassee. I shop at that Dollar General every week. The options there are not always the healthiest, but there are ways that you can make healthy food with what you find there. So access to kind of nutrition information that meets people where they're at, whether that's looking at the restaurants or stores that are in town, or looking at maybe cultural recipes that can be tweaked to be healthier, to create, of course, we talk about the mind diet because we do Alzheimer's and dementia primarily. But access to things like that, being aware that there are organizations like Share the Care, like the Alzheimer's Association, like Memory Care, that are available. You know, it's a tough thing to be given a magic wand to talk policy when it is so intersectional, and so many different things can be adjusted. I mean, I speak in the community with people all the time, and you know, intergenerational families have different issues than, you know, when I speak to law enforcement. A lot of their domestic calls in rural areas are folks that are dealing with a cognitive decline issue in a loved one who maybe doesn't remember that they don't drive anymore. And that's why, you know, somebody's not giving them their keys. It's, there's a lot of different things, but I think ultimately it does come down to meeting people where they're at. You know, it can be hard to align state health improvement goals with community health improvement goals, but I think by de-siloing a little bit and engaging with the people who are doing boots on the ground work, they're the ones that are going to be able to tell us what the policy needs to be. So it's my hope to continue trying to do that in my day-to-day work.
So with the people that you interact with, what would be a specific policy change that you would identify that might make their life easier, or something that you've seen in the folks that you work with?
I definitely agree with Ms. Mary and Alexis, but I would at least say for the memory disorder clinic, and my colleagues Megan and Treva can probably back me up on this, but funding is definitely a huge concern. And the amount of people living in Florida who are impacted by dementia and not enough funding to go around. The biggest thing that I see is people not being able to afford respite services, people not being able to afford to hire a companion care aide or to place their loved one into long-term care facility, people not being able to afford their basic needs on top of having to navigate caregiving. And what happens is there is an increase in caregiver burnout. There's an increase in caregiver challenges that leads to not being able to effectively manage and help care for their loved one. 90% of, I would at least say from my experience in the 2 years I've been at the memory disorder clinic, caregivers, there's not enough resources. For example, this is just being completely transparent, having, you know, patients or families come in and say, well, I want to sign my loved one up for Meals on Wheels, but now their Meals on Wheels, it's a backlog of people not being able to get Meals on Wheels. And then now we're dealing with people who may not be able to afford groceries. And so it's so much, honestly, Mr., that I can't even tell you what the one thing is, because like Alexis and Miss Mary said, there's so much need. And so I definitely can go on and on, but I'm not. But I can definitely say the root is funding, and funding for these resources that are needed.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take the moderator's point of personal privilege and give you one really specific one. Medicare ended payment to physicians for telehealth visits at the end of the fiscal year. So my person is end-stage Alzheimer's. He's lived with us for 9 years. He is totally bedbound. Hoyer lift to get him in and out of bed, because we learned when my wife herniated her disc in her back trying to move him, that you need a Hoyer lift to get your person out of bed. Trying to get my father-in-law from the Hoyer into the wheelchair onto the transport bus to take him for an in-person physical appointment with a physician is incredibly difficult and crazily not cost-effective. So my one kind of policy fix would be to restore the telehealth option for all of our families of all ages who have loved ones that transporting them to a physical doctor's appointment is really something that is incredibly difficult.
I think it's the case of it not being user-friendly, and it being about the way that the system is used to working rather than the way the system ought to work to meet the needs of the individual that's involved. I will say that what I have observed over the last several years due to COVID is that the medical world is a lot more open to virtual care than they ever have been before. So a lot of times now, whether you can receive that type of virtual support or not, depends on who's paying the bill, like what is your insurance coverage or what is their, who's their provider. And sometimes we have to adapt to who our provider is in order to get access to the services that we need. I would say that.
I want to give each of my panelists an opportunity to have any closing last words.
Yeah. Yes, I have a few things I'd like to say. I think, first of all, we are the largest organization of our kind in the state of Florida because of the caregiver focus and not the age or the particular disease indoctrination that the person has. And that doesn't mean that there's not a million great organizations and that we don't work with every single one of them. We're all partners in this kind of care. The challenge that we have here is all of our clients are dependent on multiple levels of funding in order to access the services they need. And if we experience, which it has been threatened, and we are just waiting to see what happens, we're holding our breath. If something happens, I call it, instead of the domino effect, it's the Jenga tower effect. If you pull two big bricks out of the Jenga tower in the middle of it, the top is going to topple over. And we, the community level providers, are on the top. Who's on the middle and the bottom, the support? The Medicaid program. And so I'm super concerned about what's going to happen to our folks that really need this up here in the community care when communities, states, governments in general are going to have to make choices about people's care because this down here disappeared, and now we have to take this up here to fill this hole. So right now, we have waiting lists. I mean, Whitney's right. You know, we all have waiting lists for services. But what will happen when we have waiting lists and no funding? And it's at multiple levels. And these are the highest level of care, the lowest income people that we're talking about pulling out their bricks and filling in for funding. And legislators are going to be forced to make difficult decisions. And it shouldn't be about, well, we can't fund it all, so we'll just fund this, because we need it all. Caregivers need it all. So that would be my thing, my last thing. I mean, actually, I have more if you want to talk later. But it's necessary that we be conscious of the whole picture.
Well, very well said. Hard act to follow, but I'll leave you all with basically the vision of the Alzheimer's Association is to live in a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. Ultimately, our vision is to achieve that through research. Research is a big one. That's probably the thing I'd leave y'all with, is think about how the research also drives our risk reduction, drives our early prevention, drives early diagnosis. It drives our quality care and support. Everything that I do is driven by the research that we are able to do. So if we're talking about things that are maybe more at risk right now than they have been in a while, research and funding research is something that I would hang my hat on and hope that everyone kind of thanks their local scientists. You know, it's their work that really drives everything that I'm able to do and ultimately does support caregivers, patients, and that goes for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia, but, you know, pretty much everybody in need of care across the board. So thank you all so much.
Wait, I just want to add one quick thing. If they cured Alzheimer's, we'd have plenty of money.
So I want to add that the TMH Memory Disorder Clinic is one of 17 clinics in the state of Florida, and I have been with the Memory Disorder Clinic since 2023, and I'm so grateful to have Megan and Treva, who joined our staff a few months ago, Megan recently. But my passion, my goal, and the goal of the clinic is to support our community, our patients, our families, all impacted by dementia. Like Ms. Mary has said and Alexis has said, that we are living in critical times. And now more than ever, it is up to us to lean on one another and support our community members. I'm so passionate about raising awareness on dementia education, providing support to caregivers, and I really hope that the conversations that have been had tonight can go into making some positive changes to better support our families, individuals, and community impacted by dementia. Thank you.
Saying one last thing, no for me without me. So I would just add that I think that caregivers' voices need to be integral in the building of any policy going forward. Thank you very much.
Because I love him. I took on the caregiving role because there's no other role you would take. I was married 52 years when he passed away. And, but I would not have done anything different.
I chose to be her caregiver because she nurtured her kids actually, from birth to now, and therefore we're supposed to reciprocate the same way that she had done for us. And I want to be at her side every minute. I just don't want to leave her alone or send her to any nursing home whatsoever.
So Florida State has lots of people who are dedicated in identifying kind of solutions to the challenges that we're facing because of population aging, and lots of people really dedicated to understanding the factors that help us be healthier as we age. And the reason that's relevant here is that the more we can be healthy at every stage of life, the longer we can go before we need help from somebody who is providing care. And the average person will care for an older adult for 5 years of their life. Our center here is dedicated to understanding the unique policy challenges that we're likely to face and to be able to help inform policies looking ahead so we can address these problems better. We are a state that desperately needs to start thinking about real solutions to prepare for the aging of our population and their caregiving needs.
The fact that I get to spend this time with my mom means a lot to me because, you know, I just feel like one day she might not be here, so I'm just enjoying spending the time with my mom while she's still in my life.
When you help a caregiver, you are helping the person that they're caring for. Because we need to be, it's like putting the oxygen mask first so we can attend the significant other or the child. But yes, we really need so much more help.
For being here today. Appreciate all of the people who've been able to be involved and to share their story today. And these videos were such a wonderful opportunity for us to partner with Share the Care, which you just heard all the wonderful things that they're doing for the state of Florida and for caregivers here. AARP has been such a great partner for being able to bring this event together. We also have lots of people who've come today to provide all kinds of resources upstairs. So before you leave today, if you would go up and take a look at all of the great materials that are here to talk about all the supportive resources we have for Floridians here. And you're welcome to come and grab another snack before you go. But as we bring everything to a close, I just want to thank all of you for coming, for hearing all of our stories, and we hope that you'll have a chance to follow up with us. We'll be sharing these materials with you as well, and hope to be able to do more of these, have these important conversations with all of you in the future. Have a wonderful night.